to the live art podcast Airtime. We should use its title more, Jazz. I keep forgetting that it's like called Airtime.
Yes, Airtime, the live art
Airtime
podcast.
Airtime : the live art podcast. As usual, I am Emma, and this is Jazz.
Hi, I'm Jazz.
Yeah, and we have some guests on today's episode.
Yay!
Very excitingly. Yay!
Welcome.
Hello. Our wonderful creative liaisons, Cassie and Daz. Hello.
Hello. Glad to be here today.
How you guys been doing? What you been up to? Who are you, for those who may not know you?
Want me to start, Daz?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Cassie. Doing all right, thank you. What have I been doing? So I've done some stuff at the Guild with live art. I was in Sandbox with Emma, and done some stuff outside the Guild as well. Right now, I'm working on a Guild production with 3 bugs that is called Bright World. It's pretty exciting. We're doing it over Zoom, so it's quite stressful, but we're getting there. And no, that's kind of it at the minute, really. Assessments are done, and just chilling. Yeah,
That's always fun.
Yeah, and I am Daz, the other creative liaison. I love weird and wonderful theatre, especially directing it and plucking it from the depths of my mind. And yeah, I've done a few bits in the Guild, and now I'm doing more community arts projecty things, digital storytelling, all that stuff, which is really fun online because the arts can survive online. Everyone is what I've discovered. And currently I'm trying to find a TV show to get into because I've ran out of all good content.
Ooh. I haven't watched Netflix in a while, so I couldn't really tell you what to watch. I've been told Bridgerton is bad way, so I don't know.
Oh. I mean, it's pretty. Like, it's visually nice.
Yeah, but apparently the plot is not that. I mean, I don't know. That's what my housemates told me yesterday, so don't quote me on that. I haven't watched it.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, welcome.
We hope you enjoy your stay. So, this is going to be the title of today's show is called Making Art, Breaking Hearts. We're going to be touching on a variety of things for creatives to be resilient and all of that when going into the creative battlefield, which was a topic that I a phrase that I sort of coined.
Yeah, that was
yesterday.
a very cool phrase.
Yeah, the creative battlefield.
Yeah.
Your art. We love to see it. So I guess the first thing is audition rejection. Auditions, they're pretty immense and scary and very intense. How do you guys cope with, rejections, but also preparing?
There we go.
I can
None
get
of us
words
can
out. I'm not
speak
completely
today.
dead. So how do you guys prepare and also handle audition rejection?
Well, at first not really well, if I'm completely honest. I
That's cool.
yeah, like the first, I'd say, year or so, you just I mean, you can't help but take it personally, really. But what I did as like a coping mechanism, which is the worst coping mechanism ever, is to basically not work as hard on monologues on my audition process, and then I could have, because I was like, oh yeah, if I got rejected, it's because I didn't work hard enough on it, and I had like a reason, kind of. So that was how I coped at first, and then I realized that I was just shooting myself in the foot, really. So I don't know. It's kind of it's kind of like a thing that everybody tells you. It's just you've got to remember that if they reject you, it's not truly for you. It's just because you were not what they were looking for. And I'd say the way I found like a better way to like kind of cope with like rejections, etc., was to make very strong choices in my like character choices, because then I knew that if they didn't choose me for the character they created from the material, it's because it just wasn't the character they were looking for. But at least I made strong choices and I enjoyed playing that character. So that's kind of how I started like envisioning it, and like from now on just feel way better going into auditions because I make like quite strong choices. I'm very happy with the character. I get to like really enjoy the audition process, and if I get rejected, then so be it. At least I've created like a complete character, and I'm happy with it. So yeah, that's kind of it.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like I used to also not cope very well. But I haven't done that much acting, probably because of that, lol. But I think that then being on the other side of it, like directing and being there, making the decisions, I think you realise that actually, like Cassie said, it's not, most of the time the decision is not based on how good the actor was. It's literally like the style that you're looking for the character. And so I think almost having that then makes me more confident going into auditions, as Cassie was saying, like just making a strong choice, committing to it, and then if that is what they're looking for, then you've like done the best job at it, and if it's not, then oh well. Yeah, I think it's just, you have to remember it's not like how good you actually are.
But being on the other side,
we've all been on the other side of that.
Definitely helps,
we've all been there. Like when directors say, "Oh, it's such a close choice" or whatever, like we can like genuinely, that's how you feel. Like I don't know whether you've had similar experiences, but casting shows, and everyone's just so good. It's just trying to find,
and it would literally work
excite you in
either way,
project.
like the show.
Oh yeah.
The last round of auditions, I feel like after callbacks and everything, and you're like, they're all so good, and then you realize that you have choices not because of their talent or what they brought to the character, but more like with the symbiosis, like with the characters with each other, or the actors with each other. And it's kind of like, because I chose this character, this actor, I had to also choose this actor because they just work so well together. And then you realize that you have to like reject some people just because they didn't have that connection with like another person, which is kind of heartbreaking really, because they were so talented. So yeah,
connection's not really like anyone's fault as well. Like it's like not a personal thing. It's just like, do you vibe with this person? And it's okay if you don't, and it's okay if you do,
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like going on from what you were saying, one of the best things for me when I'm doing auditions is, was I proud of what I did? Because it doesn't really matter if, I mean, it does for getting the role, but if you're not proud of what you did, that's the main thing. And getting feedback as well, and critically sort of reflecting on, what worked and what didn't, and what really sort of clicked with you, I think is super important.
I would say maybe even more than hard work. I mean, it's kind of like an equal thing, but I will always prefer someone genuinely enjoying what they're doing and just seeing that they're happy to be there and to show us what they've been working on, than someone who doesn't seem to be enjoying it. So there's also like this enjoyment. That's something that as a director I've realized that I look forward to see, because then I'm like, oh, I think working with that person would be truly amazing, the process. And because we take so long to work on a show, you need to actually enjoy the people you're working with. I mean, it's easier at least if you do. So so that's definitely something I've been like looking for, and something that now in auditions I try to bring into the room, even though like I'm stressed, like I'm so really, really, really stressed before going into an audition room. But at least if I show a smile and I'm like, yes, I'm happy to be here, I find that the process is usually more successful. So yeah.
How do you guys manage like audition stress? Because I know like the night before I'm reading over the extracts or whatever and marking things through, and then as you're waiting, because I mean in normal times you'd wait outside the room in the guild and just like see everybody else there. How do you guys have any tactics or stuff for managing stress sort of night before or day of auditions?
I think, I mean, I'm like the biggest planner ever, so I will like overdo everything to the max. And I think sometimes getting to a point where you're like, okay, like I've literally done the prep, I need to do something else now, helps for
Yeah.
me. So just doing literally anything else, like some kind of activity that isn't looking at a script, running lines, yeah, just doing something different because it helps to come back to it a little bit more fresh than just having sat there and ran it over and over and over again. I
Yeah.
think because you can like overdo it, and
Mm.
I would say that's my main thing is to just like take a breath, do something else, and then come to it with a fresh mind is always good.
Yeah. I don't have many tips because I'm horrible at it. I have very bad stress before going to an audition room. But recently I've realized because I've been like audition tapes for like drama schools and stuff in France. So I've also started acting in French, which is something I hadn't done in a while. And I realized that especially in France, in schools, they're looking for people who really understand the text, and they spend like a lot of time just seeing if you really do understand the meaning behind the lines, etc. I don't know if it's the same in
Mm.
England, but basically they put a lot of pressure on you saying the text right and having the right intentions, etc. And I realized that I tend to overwork as well. So what I do the day off usually is that's unrelated, but physical activity just helps kind of like doing something else and to like release endorphins. And also I say my lines completely wrong, as in like I have fun with it. I just like kind of do it in an operatic voice, and then I'll just like shout them, and then I'll just whisper them, etc. I'll just do the completely wrong actions just to like release the stress, and that's something I do like along the process, but especially on the like the day off, because I just want to have fun with it. And then
Yeah.
because you've worked on your intentions so much, you know them by heart. So yeah, and then go into the room and have the right intentions, but usually have more fun with it because I haven't done it the day off with the right intentions, etc. But that doesn't work with everybody. So it really works when you've worked the text for so long and you know it by heart, and you could kind of do it while like juggling and then taking a shower at the same time and baking a cake, you know. So, yeah.
I think for me as well, like I get this in this space in my head where I'm like, oh, the people who are, you know, running the audition are these like godly beings that are sitting there staring at me, and I think it helps to just be like, actually, you know, they've probably just made a cup of tea, like they're just going about their day, like, do you know what I mean? Because you can be there like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm
for
about
sure.
to stand in front of some like, and then actually no, you're just gonna say some words in front of some random people.
Yeah.
Like it helps to kind of realize that they're just people sitting there. Like it's not that deep to them. So
True.
Yeah, I mean, they're also wanting you to do their like your best, right? Because they're wanting to create a cast and they're wanting to create a show, and they don't want to spend too much time sitting in a room or like watching your tapes or whatever, because they've got other things to do. So, you know, they want you to do well, and they want you to be exactly what they're looking for, right? So it's all positive vibes coming from behind the table towards you, and I think that's something that often gets lost because, you know, you're going in and you're like, oh, I don't know whether I'm good enough, I don't know whether I'm gonna, you know, do this well, but everyone wants you to do your best.
To be honest, I mean, I might be wrong there, but it's also with in media, etc. The audition room is just it's kind of like dramatized as this, like, you know, this room where people just look at you and say no, and then you have to get out the door, and it's just not that genuinely. And I know the first year I started auditioning, like audition for drama school for the first time, I didn't know what I was doing at all. But just seeing that, you know, people actually want you to do well, and they want you to try things out, etc. And then auditioning for the guilds with like younger people, you just realize that they're just not these like very strict figures that will just take a look at you and based on your physique, will just tell you to fuck off. So yeah, I think it's just been really dramatized in media as this this ultimate moment for an actor, and I think that's kind of it's a counterproductive, really. Think about it, the audition process is just you get there of like an hour in advance. You spend like 5-10 minutes in the room, and then you go about your day, and there's so much more to it. There are hours and hours of preparing, and then waiting for an answer, etc. So yeah, it's just it's not like this very dramatic moment as it's presented in movies or TV shows, I think. So,
yeah. But you do have like a large emotional input, especially if it's a role that you're like super into or a project that you're super into. So I think, I don't know, you've got to cut a balance between being massively involved, safely, emotionally massively involved, and treating it for what it is, which is just you rocking up to a room, rocking an entire room,
unless you do really well.
Air guitar, yeah. Well, it might do if it goes really well. And like showing what you can do and then getting about your day, which is sort of what it is, right? There's a fine balance, I think, with auditioning and looking after your welfare whilst going through an audition process that is really hard to cut, and nobody really tells you how to, and I don't think anybody really knows properly how to cut the balance correctly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And as a writer as well, and someone who writes things, that's something that I try to incorporate in the things that I write as well, like making characters accessible for actors to approach. And it is difficult, and doing characterization work and things is so important for when I'm acting, breaking down the intentions of lines and all of the given circumstances and Stanislavski stuff that's out there. We love a drama student, but at the same time it is very important to understand who this character is that you're being, because you are trying to truthfully portray this other person that isn't you, and getting that truth in what you do is so important for a director to see, and that is what acting is at the end of the day. It's being this other person and trying to represent what's on the page truthfully in person. So yes, that's what I would say to you out there, dear listener.
So once you've kind of got like a project through and you're past the audition stage, and you've either you're a director or you're a production team member, and you've got your cast together, or you're part of a cast and you've got the role, how is it, how do you manage sort of giving criticism within that space? Because obviously you want to try and build giving and receiving criticism, basically, because you want to try and build like a team environment because you're working together to make something, but there needs to be you want to make the best thing, right? So how do you guys go about giving and receiving criticism in that sort of space, and doing it in a nice, polite way, but also a professional way?
Ooh. That's actually a very good question, because it's something I'm still trying to figure out, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Like on the directing point of view, I would say it's like a method I'm still trying to balance out, because when I started directing, I was quite young. It was like during youth theatre groups, and then we were allowed to just direct each other, and I was so harsh. I was the worst kid ever. I was just bossing people around, and it just took a while for me to realize that I just needed to treat people with respect, even within the theatre. Yeah, and then when you grow up and you realize that you actually you need to pay people respect, I realized I just needed to be much more chill about the project, and just if I thought something would look better on stage, I just needed to say it in a polite way. So I think it's truly a sense of it's the same balance that you have in real life. You just pay people respect. You are polite and just express your ideas, and I think just having that very collaborative project, and just telling your actors that they have that their voice is as much impact as yours within the
Definitely.
project, to try and just disassemble this a director figure, I think is great, because a director is not above anyone else. I think that's
No.
it's just
Not at all.
bullshit.
Definitely.
So it's your actors will have as much input as you as a director in the project, and they should be heard and listened to as much as anyone else. So yeah, I think I don't know. I don't know if that really answered the question, but it was definitely a hard thing to balance at first for me, and I'm still
Yeah.
trying to figure that out. And it's also letting your actors know. I think that's also why it's important to have people that are outside of the project that can just listen to the actors or any of the prod team members, and that are not involved within the project, just in terms of well-being and then mental health wise. So your actors know that they can just go to these people if they have an issue, if they're stressed, if the director is just being an absolute moron, or things like that. Know that they have a way out if something goes wrong, I think is important. It's all about trust, really, as well. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's a weird one for me because I do more devising stuff, which sometimes feels a little bit less directory because it's got more of a collaborative vibe. I don't actually think it is less directory. It's just kind of different. And I think my way of giving criticism generally is more about sort of pointing out a problem to solve rather than being like, do this instead. So it's like, oh, this bit isn't working. What, like, can we try? What should we do? Like, and trying to get the actors to help solve it. And I think it's that thing that we've all been saying, like, of respect. And I would also want them to say that to me as well. Like, hey, Daz, this bit just feels completely bleh. Like, can we try something else? And then we do. I think it's that thing of just always giving it a go, whether it's an actor suggesting something to you or you to them. Like, as long as everyone gives it a go, and then you can see whether it actually works. But it's hard, especially I think with devising, to find the balance of giving criticism but also being like, let's make a piece together. But I think it's just being able to take criticism as well, like even as a director. If people are just like, no, that idea is rubbish, you have to be like, yeah, you're right, it is. Let's do something else. Because sometimes you do suggest something and it is just terrible, and you watch it and you're so like, bad. Everyone knows that this is bad, let's move on.
Definitely. And going on from that, I think it's really important for directors to be approachable, and
for sure,
have a conversation with the actors. And that's when I direct, that's how I try and approach it, that there isn't any absolute rights and wrongs. It's a piece that you're creating together. Yes, there is this vision from this person, but it's a collaborative effort. And if an actor has, a really good idea for a scene or a segment or whatever, if they're too scared or too, they don't feel that they can share that opinion, then that's going to be lost forever, and you're not going to get that in the piece. So it's really important to just respect people. It's coming back to that respect as well, and value everyone's opinion, no matter who they are, where they sort of rank in the list of people in the program.
Some people can definitely give their criticism without irrespectful tact, and you've just got to learn that, or you just got to not take it to heart, because if you foregrounded that sort of atmosphere of mutual respect and collaboration, then it should be easy to just be like, to acknowledge where you're wrong and acknowledge your mistakes. But sometimes it can be really hard, because especially if it's like a passion project or it's something you've worked like a lot on, it can be super hard to be like, oh yeah, that is actually kind of bad, rather than being like, this is the artistic pinnacle of the century, And I think just kind of taking everything with a little bit of sugar, even if some people are kind of, that's really bad. But there are, I think a lot of people can sometimes are just not the most tactful with it, and that's okay. It's when you have like strong emotions, because like theatre is an area with like tons of strong emotions, and emotions run very high. Definitely. It's just good to take a step back, like leave the room for a bit, breathe for a bit, and be like, okay, listen, this is just a show. Like this isn't the be all and end all. Emotions are running quite high. I've just got to take a second and be like, okay, come back in with this calm attitude, because you can just let things get away with you, and that's okay to let them get to you, right? But you've got to put them in perspective, I think.
Yeah. I think as well, in terms of taking direction, I'm really bad at it. And since directing things, I've seen people be really good at it. And so I would say that when taking direction, like, pause. Because what I used to do is I would like finish the scene, whatever it is, then I'd get my direction, then I'd do it again, and I'd focus on the one thing that the director just said I did wrong, and then do none of the things right that I'd done the previous time. And and you start like forgetting your lines because you're thinking like, oh, I need to do this instead and whatever. But I've noticed like actors who take the direction and then just like have a minute, think it all through, and then go do a much better job than I used to do of it.
That's actually good advice. Yeah, I think it's just like a case of like creating in the first, let's say, like 2-3 rehearsals, to maybe like have some practical collaborative time where everyone can speak together. I mean, of course, that should happen during the entire project. But I mean, I don't know, maybe lay out some papers where you can all collaborate on, like post-its or actual, just have an actual time where you just collaboratively just speak together or like write together, just to like figure out everybody's boundaries at the beginning of the process. I think that's quite important, and then you can kind of build a trust within, like, with everybody, and it's also a good thing to kind of discover the partners you're going to act with and just interact with. So it's just I think it's good to have those times, especially at the beginning of the process, to figure out everything. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, I guess the next place to go is how to deal with audience reactions and things, and any reviews, feedback, and how to incorporate that in sort of the production run of a piece once you've finally put it together and you're actually showing it to the public.
Because that can be hard.
Definitely. I think the best teacher for that is comedy, as in starting like doing a comedy, like a play that is comical. Thank you, Cassie, for the definition. But sorry about that.
Theatre terms with Cassie.
That should be a jingle, Emma. But yeah.
Oh, there we go. We'll have a segment each week.
But when you realize that each night, when you act in a comedy, each night is going to be different, and you're not going to have laughs or laughter at one point, and you're going to have laughs where nobody laughed before, and you realize how unreliable I mean, it's a beautiful relationship with the audience. That's what we do theatre for. It's to be with an audience. It's to just act with them. It's a sharing relationship. But it's also extremely unreliable. And the audience, they're people of their own, and they do whatever they want, and they react if they want to. And when you do comedy and you just kind of flop and you realize, oh, that wasn't funny, or people didn't laugh, you just realize that you will get different reactions each night, even if you do it the exact same way. So I would say that's the best teacher in terms of taking rejection from an audience. And recover from it. You work harder. I don't know. That's a bad advice. I think it's I mean, it's just like, in any normal relationship, I would say, I mean, except you're one person in front of like an audience of, I don't know, maybe hundreds of people. But it's just like a relationship. The other person has a mind of their own, and they're not going to react the way you believe they will in your head, because they're just a human being with their emotions, their lives, etc. And you just have to, I guess, get on with it, and hopefully it won't impact your work as much. You just have to deliver a show, and then you'll reflect on it later, I guess.
Yeah.
I think with, like, obviously with comedy, it's almost a bit easier because your audience will kind of tell you how they're responding to it without you actually having to ask them. But I think when you're doing something else, it's, I think, about asking the right questions of the audience sometimes, because I think last year? God no, time is...
Yeah.
Time is meaningless.
More than ever, time is a construct.
At some point in the past, I made a show that was really weird for live art, and it didn't have much speaking, and there was a lot of just weird movement stuff going on. And that was one where I was like, okay, like, who knows how anyone's gonna receive this. And so we did our little pre-audience performance to the committee members and all that to try and get like an idea. And I think you have to kind of focus on what your aim was for the audience to take away from it, and then asking them sort of what they got from it, without being like, what did you think it meant? Like how did it make you feel? And if that's right, then it doesn't really matter I think if someone, just didn't like the movement, then fine. Like, you can't make something that everyone's gonna like. So I think just the thing of like, how did it make you feel, what, that kind of thing. But also I think if it's an ethical criticism, then you should just take it on board. Because like, if you're making something controversial and someone who knows more about it, or doesn't even, has a point to make that you maybe did something wrong, then obviously you should look into that. But if it's more on your artistic choices, I think you can decide how much of it you want to take on board, because you can't please everyone. So
I would say also, if your show involves audience interaction, I think that's also the hardest, because you don't know if the audience just does not react and does not engage. It kind of throws everything out the window. So I mean, Emma, when we did Sandbox, there was a part of like an audience interaction, and it was one of our, I think, biggest concerns, was that no one would interact with us and with my character in particular. And I know that I didn't want to look at myself because I wore a terrifying costume. And I know it was terrifying, and I needed to get like an audience member on board with me, although I looked like a freaking monster. And and I remember our director Sam being like, maybe you could try and do that to look a bit less terrifying and more like a cute baby. It didn't work because the mask was still very so like during the whole process, I refused myself in the mirror to look at like recordings and stuff, because I knew that if I looked at myself with the mask on, I would ultimately get the idea of what, like, get the image of like a very terrifying character, and in my head I was a very cute baby, kind of. So I think it's also a thing of you've got to trust the audience, and you've got to believe in yourself and in your character. And ultimately, each time it worked. We had audience interaction, and then people weren't too afraid to actually interact and work with us. But we also prepared for what if they just don't come on stage. They just refuse to come on stage. So I would say it's also preparing for alternatives, preparing for the worst, and just, if it doesn't work, just get on with it and try something else and try a new tactic. But it's also a case of trust the process and trust your work as well, and hopefully, because you believe there will be an audience interaction, and you're several of you believe that within the project, ultimately there will be an audience interaction, and people who come to your show where there is audience interaction will also want to interact with you, most of them. So yeah.
I think it is about like self-belief as well. I mean, even if you're on like the production team or if you're in the cast or whatever, and somebody's like, oh, that was really great, like I really enjoyed, like that can be, you can take that at face value, or you can read the subtext into it. But if you've got like a belief in the project, as Daz was saying, you're not going to please everyone, sometimes things are not going to work, but that kind of belief in the project, and like, if I'm happy with what I'm doing, then that's enough, and if it hits other people in the same way it's hit you, then that's great, but if it doesn't, then that's also good. So it's just kind of resilience and belief in yourself and what you're creating, I think, is the most important thing.
I mean, and Daz talked about asking the audience the right questions, and I think that's one of the most valuable things, is that instead of, I mean, of course we always want to know if we did well or not, but instead of asking, oh, did you enjoy it, did you like it, ask specific questions about maybe the politics of the performance, of the message you wanted to come across, etc. Ask what they thought about it, what questions did it raise, and these conversations will have much more impact on what you will create in the future and on the piece itself, because then you will have a new look on your work, and ultimately that's what you want. You want to keep hopefully if you're creative, that's what you want to do. You want to keep creating and keep thinking and creating new things on stage. So I believe that it's much asking, did you enjoy it? Of course you want to have positive feedback on your work, but you also want to keep moving and keep creating. So the most valuable questions are just to ask the audience, what they thought about it, into like what message came across, etc. And if they have any questions, I think these are the most valuable conversations I've through show, I think.
I think it's also just even more fun to ask those questions. You just get more interesting answers. Like someone will say you're trying to make a piece about something, and someone in the audience is like, oh, I thought it was about this. You're like, oh, cool. Like that is not what we were going for. But most, as long as most people you get your point across to most people, there's always going to be people who just get something completely different from it. And that's like so fun to hear about, where you're like, oh my God, I didn't even see that. But cool.
Exactly. Because, when you're creating stuff, it's never a static thing, even once you're, performing a piece, because it changes from night to night, but it also develops from the first show to the last. And, taking audience feedback and all of that is good, but I think it's also about, like you're saying, reflecting on if that is helpful to you as a director, as a creative, and also being able to criticize your own work, because nothing is ever perfect, and there's always some tweaks in some way that you can do, and finding them and having a play with them, even during a run of a show, in rehearsals from show to show, it just keeps the piece fresh. And that, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do, like once a show is actually happening.
And there's some stuff that you just can't predict as well. Like you think a moment's going to be really big, and then you have the audience there and it isn't, or something. Like there's a different kind of energy, and it's worth like responding to that as you go along if you can, or just anticipating that everything's probably not going to sit exactly in the way that you thought it would, which is exciting. But also something that you can kind of respond to as you go along if you have the opportunity to.
I think play is a really key word as well, because I know we've used it a lot. It's not kind of fixing or changing or whatever, it's just a really like playful and nice thing, because obviously things are going to be bad and your audience is going to react like differently to how you expect them, whatever, but you are allowed to take pride in the good stuff, right? Nothing is ever going to be perfect, but there are going to be things that are great for this particular piece, and like you're allowed to as much as, you know, you can't please everyone, and you can tweak and tweak and tweak to within an inch of its life, you know, playing with the production is a far more productive, I mean, at least to me, is a far more productive mindset to have when going into it, because it means that, you know, it's creative, and it's, you know, I'm trying to find the best way to describe it, but do you get what I mean, right?
Yeah.
It's not like this was awful, let's shut it down and change it, right? It's a more
this would be
fluid
fun
way of thinking.
Yeah.
I think it's also a case of I mean, I know it's going to sound a bit cheesy, but maybe not look for perfection. I know that it's a term that has been used, and it's very hard because we've been raised that way, and I mean, in the education system and everywhere really. And I have the hardest time trying to not go down to the tiniest of details within a production. This has to be on time, like perfectly on beat, etc. And this has to be completely perfect. And that's something I try and call myself out on because I do that all the time. But it's also a thing of trying to remember your goals. Your goal rarely is to create a perfect piece of work. Usually your goal, I mean, for me, it's more to raise questions and to question the audience. Usually is like my end goal. But you have to kind of set your goals, and I don't think perfection necessarily has to be one of it. You want to create a good piece of work because you want your message to come across, and you want it to look good and to be entertaining, and I mean, to, you know, for an audience to just interact with it. But also, perfection doesn't have to be the rule. It can still be a work in progress, but still be so good. And the best pieces of work I've seen were still in the process of being made. You know, they weren't stone. And I like, it's within the industry, it's quite hard in terms of, you've got like a commercial. Usually we make the difference between commercial theatre and then fringe theatre, but I tend to really appreciate fringe theatre more for that thing, for the fact that sometimes it's just a work in progress and you can see that, but you can still enjoy it. And they're waiting for audience participation. They're waiting for you to tell them, oh, that was interesting, and made me think of this and that. And you get more of these interactions with the work that is not made to be perfect, I feel. So yeah,
that's such a good point. I feel like it just comes back to that whole thing of just being open-minded, and also just not aiming for perfection. I mean, like, I just had this hilarious memory, Cassie, that you just reminded me of when we were doing Adrift, and there were these white marshmallows, and one day they accidentally took the pink ones on that were like the trial run marshmallows, and I was sitting there at the tech desk like, no, like, there's meant to be the white ones, like everything's got to be white, blah 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 blah. But it's like, just go back to what the goal of the piece is. Does anyone care that the marshmallows are pink? No. I think it's what you said about just going back to the goal, I think is always useful, facing criticism from anyone, but also from yourself. Like, what were you trying to achieve in the first place? And sure, that will change and evolve, but that should be what you focus on, rather than like, everything's got to happen at this time in this way. And because it just, half the time it won't happen, and it'll actually be better for it anyway.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And it comes down to the whole thing of theatre being a human experience. Like, it's so much more human than, you know, TV and film. It's so unfiltered, and we as people aren't perfect, and the human experience isn't perfect, and it's just rolling with that, you know. It's so much more endearing, and it's why seeing live theatre, how much I miss it, why it is so magical. And I think actually having those moments of imperfection are better in some cases than when things go according to plan, you know. And rolling with that as an actor, as a creative, is, you know, it's just part of the artistic process, and that's so important to consider when you're actually creating and refining work.
Well said.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we could go on and on and on having these conversations for literally forever. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap up this episode?
Not really, no. I think it was quite complete.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe going on what Jazz just said, just can't wait to see live theatre like back on and just create stuff with actual people in a room is what I miss the most. So in the meantime, we have many projects going on, but yeah, can't wait for that to come back.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Airtime, the actual title of the podcast. Yeah, I guess I none of us really know how to wrap this up really nice and succinctly.
No, exactly. It was the same last episode. We were just like,
the same last episode. We're like,
guess it's the end
goodbye. Next episode is about getting on with casts and getting on with production team, which is going to be a very, very exciting conversation to have. So we will see you there. Have a safe morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you're listening to this. Stay happy and well, and we will see you in the next episode of Airtime. That's about it.
Bye.
That's about it.
See ya.